distinguished speaker who has had a very interesting career, actually, or several careers in different ways, from engineering to management, and that's conventional enough. But then, become much more interested in retiring to learn Chinese history. I think we'd all love to do that more and more. And obviously with a base in both Hong Kong and in Singapore.
United States.
And the US as well. So we're very lucky to have you here. I might say that you also have a very distinguished audience.
Well, certainly.
In case they've introduced themselves already. And the topic one, which is very, very important, maybe important at this very moment in China, in a private dialogue going on. And it is based on a reading of the documents. As a matter of fact, ICS has had several archival seminars recently, and I think that this attention to the detail is, rather than skirting the rhetoric, is something that is very, very important. So, are you giving a full PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes, right. So, about 45 minutes?
Well, stop me anytime. Time's
oh,
up.
I don't intend to stop you anytime, but we'll start.
Yeah, you need to.
Yes. So, thank you very much, and yes, let's go.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present my research. So why must we talk about this topic? The PRC's justification for refusing to negotiate with the Tibetans is, number one, the Dalai Lama refuses to admit that Tibet has been part of China since antiquity. That's the Chinese position, everybody knows that. And also, the PRC claims that Tibet is being unified and not invaded or occupied. And the basis is against the same thing. Tibet has been part of China since antiquity. How far back is antiquity? We'll talk about that later on. The official position is stated in this document, which of course I think we should be aware of that. So this is an example of what the Chinese nationals are being fed. This is the translation from the Chinese text. Okay, so this one, of course, is from the official Chinese website, and this is 2008. Okay, they repeat the same correct idea. So the Vice Minister of the United Front of China, Sita, stated the following during the National Press Conference, blah, 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 and so forth. Okay, basically, the fundamental political basis is recognizing that Tibet has been an inseparable part of China since antiquity. The Dalai Lama has consistently refused to educate himself seriously and correctly on such a fundamental issue, and that is, of course, taken as something that's obviously incorrect and wrong, and the Chinese, of course, consider that as an obvious crime. Okay? It continues to, of course, repeat the accusation from 2002 to the most recent meetings. We have confirmed with Dalai personal representative 9 times. Each time they have indicated that they do not agree that Tibet is part of China since antiquity. And to the Chinese, again, that is just, again, that proves that the Dalai Lama is well, incorrect, to say the least. So, since antiquity, how long back is antiquity? The PRC has revised the claim recently, not recently, well, sometime about 20 years ago. So now it means the Yuan Dynasty. So my research is just to address the Chinese claim, and that is, I'm going to ask a question, and that is, was China part of China since the Yuan Dynasty? Because since PRC claims that it starts, since the Yuan Dynasty, so we're talking about Yuan, Ming, Qing, and then the Republic of China. And I'm talking about Tibet over here. In this particular talk, I'm limiting myself to what is today's TAR, and because there are some of the Tibetan regions in Qing and Sichuan, and that becomes a little bit more murky. The TAR question is a lot clearer. So for each dynasty, what I do is that I examine whether Tibet was independent of China from the perspective of each of the various Chinese administrative aspects, such as the classification and labeling of regions, taxation, tribute, census, education, judicial system, and so forth. And also look at individual events, whether those individual events would reflect China having any ruling power or administrative structure in Tibet. I am taking completely Chinese chauvinistic approach because my purpose is to address my Chinese compatriots, okay, and try to sort of convince the Chinese. So my Chinese chauvinistic approach is that why should I listen to the Tibetans? Why should I believe the Indians or the British or whatever? I use only Chinese documents, okay? So all the documents that I use, are written in the Chinese language. They are published in China sometime between the Yuan Dynasty and the beginning of the PRC. The overwhelming majority of these documents have been republished and reprinted by the PRC after 1949, and the majority of these documents are also available for examination via international internet websites that are operated by PRC institutions and approved by and supported by the PRC government. In other words, I'm telling my readers, my target audience of course is the Chinese, and they don't believe a single word I say, go and check it out yourself. To this audience, to some of you might be an empty challenge because you don't read Chinese, but for those of you who read Chinese, this is a very, very, it's a deadly serious challenge, okay? Please check it out. So today's talk, I think I have 45 minutes. I think what I'll probably be able to do is to demonstrate the use of China's primary and semi-primary records to examine whether Tibet was part of China during Ming Dynasty by looking at the administrative aspect of one administrative aspect, and that's how Tibet was classified in Chinese documents. And then I'll probably talk a little bit about individual events. But before I do that, I need to talk about this part, and I want to explain something about Chinese historiography, because Chinese historiography, again, given that I'm a self-declared chauvinistic Chinese, okay, I think it is somewhat unique in most civilizations. So first of all, there's a difference between science and history over here. Okay, in science, when we teach Pythagoras theorem in high school, you know, a squared plus b squared plus c squared, we really don't need to prove that it comes from Pythagoras because it's already quite irrelevant. Okay, I can prove that this is correct. Okay, in history, it's different. Who should I believe, particularly in something like Tibetan history? Okay, the Tibetans claim the Chinese are telling lies. The Chinese are claiming the Tibetans are telling lies. So why should I listen to you, or rather, why should you listen to me? Right? So this is some of the basic points of Chinese historiography. Number one, about accuracy. History of officers appointed by governments and official histories are prepared by large and respectable groups of panels of scholars, and this has been going on for 3,000 plus years, using the same continually dominant written language. Okay, so somebody like me, for example, I can go back and read the document that's written by somebody 3,000 years ago, and I can understand what's about. Yeah? And then it's primarily by a group of secular scholars, very little religious and supernatural elements, no superheroes and no deities. Okay, in my humble opinion, again, that sort of protects some of its objectivity. So this is on the aspect of accuracy. When we look at a history document, there are two things we want to judge. Number one, do we trust the content? Was it written by people that are trustworthy? But then after that, there's another problem, and there's authenticity. And there's authenticity over here, particularly for these old documents. How do we know that we can still trust the authenticity? Because it was handed down after 2,000 years or 1,000 years. It might have been written in a reliable form, but then the edition changes, and then somebody has doctored it or fabricated it. Okay, so in China we have many sort of reliable ways of preserving it, but one of the most important one for our purpose is what's called the Sigu Quan Shu, okay, the four libraries, and that of course is something that was done by this Qing Dynasty emperor, and there are 3,400 titles that are sort of identified as some of the most important Chinese documents and books of Chinese civilization. And of course, divided 4 libraries, and of course, we are only interested in the one that is in history, and there are about close to 1,000 titles of that. And those things have been very, very reliably preserved. So we were pretty sure that we are getting the original document that was written 1,000 years ago, or as the case may be. So, how are these histories of China sort of compiled? The primary source we first of all have what's called the rising and living records. Literally means that when the emperor rises, okay, the scribe will follow the emperor and record everything. And then after that, of course, when he attends cabinet meetings or court meetings or whatever, everything again will be recorded. And then at the death of each emperor, the successor of the emperor, usually the son or the brother or whatever, will then convene a panel of scholars and look through all the daily records and then come up with a set of veritable records for that emperor. And then, of course, it goes on, for each dynasty. And today we have a complete set of, some of the older ones are lost, okay? But for the Ming and the Qing dynasty, we have a complete set of records, veritable records of each of the emperors in those dynasties. And then, of course, we have the official submissions, they call officials, and then we also do imperial edicts, and those are all available in records. They are now not only handed down, but they are now digitized. Many of them are digitized, and they are in internet sites that are operated by, among other bodies, the PRC. Okay? So this is an example of what we call semi-primary sources, because remember, just now we're talking about primary sources, the veritable records, the rising records, and so forth. At the end of each dynasty, the succeeding dynasty will then appoint a panel of scholars to go through the veritable records and then prepare the official history of the preceding dynasties. And in China, we call that 正史, okay? 正史 means not only official history, it also means correct history. And that's what the Chinese recognize as that is the most official and the most trustworthy version of history of China. And of course, there are altogether about 24 or 25, depending on how you count. But for our purpose, we're only interested in just these two for the purpose of China's Tibet relationship, Ming history and Qing history. And I think today we'll be able to talk a little bit about Ming history as to what it constitutes. Okay, so these publications, incidentally, they are called imperially commissioned documents. They're about the most official or most sort of high-level documents because they are approved and commissioned by the emperors, various emperors. I just want to mention this part. Okay, these are the various ways you can go to the various websites to get the versions of this. Many of them are free. Some of them you have to subscribe. In China, Wikipedia is blocked in many places. So for the purpose of non-controversial background information, I'm going to cite Baidu. My purpose, again, is to use everything that is from China. In other words, this is something that the PRC cannot refute. I'm using everything that is approved by the PRC. So I've finished this part. So right now I'm going to talk about this part. Was Tibet considered as independent of China during the Ming Dynasty? And looking at how it was classified in Chinese documents. So for this question, I'm going to look at three versions. Because remember, the question is this. I'm asking the question. Was Tibet part of the Ming Empire? According to whom? So I'm going to say, was Tibet part of the Ming Empire according to the PRC? Was Tibet part of the Ming Empire according to the Qing document? And then was Tibet part of China according to the Ming government? Okay, so three dynasties, three governments. What are the versions like? Okay, how do they make their claims? The PRC version, the most convenient and authoritative statement of the PRC's position is given in the Historical Atlas of China, 中文历史地图集, again, 8 volumes. Again, if you go to, for example, Baidu, you can see, high places for this thing. It states, for example, that this set of documents is hailed as one of the two foundation laid achievements in the field of history. It's the most important achievements in China's history, historical geography, and the chief editor, of course, is a serious and meticulous scholar, blah, 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 and so forth. Okay, so anyway, there is sort of no question about the respectability and the authority of the work. So this is the position of the PRC, and that's the white area that's outside China. Anything that's colored is China. So the PRC's position of Ming era China is that this is all China, but this part is China but not Ming China, this part is China, but not Ming China. Everything that's colored yellow is Ming Empire, and consistent with the PRC's claim, as you can see, Tibet is part of China, and so is Manchuria. How many of you know who is Wu San Gui? Does anybody know Wu San Gui? Nobody knows that? Okay, that's fine. Then we will not go through with the joke. There's actually a very, very interesting joke with this view of China presented by the PRC. But so it's very clear. Okay? Now, let's remember I said that there were official histories of China. Okay, the 24 history, and one of the 24 history, of course, is the history, the official history of the Ming Dynasty, which of course is called Ming history. As you would expect. Again, you will go at Baidu, again, they will tell you, okay, what that is that Ming history is one of China's official history. It consists of this number. Excuse me. I'll use this number repeatedly, so it's 332. And then, of course, you can get it from various international websites for free, including some that are operated by the PRC. Then this, of course, the whole thing you can get it from Baidu. And this is an example. You go to one of the websites, and it's sponsored by China American Digital Academic Library, and of course, the version is beyond doubt, beyond question. Okay, this is how many of you can read this? This is a nice concept.
Sorry, I forgot.
Oh, no. Happens all the time. It's a lot more interesting than this. This is depressing. Okay, the music is a lot more interesting. Okay, how many of you can read this Chinese? Okay, nobody can. So I can just lie anywhere I like, right? Okay, I'll try to be honest. Okay, this is the image of the original edition of Ming history. Okay, this is a table of contents. Remember the 332 volumes. Okay, this is 350, volume 350. This is Yunnan. Okay, Yunnan. It says Burma over here. It says Laos over here. It says Northern Thailand over here. So it's very clear cut. China, as you would expect, okay, is not shy in claiming territories that China claims to be or things to belong to China. So under Yunnan province, it was Burma. It was Laos. It was Northern Thailand. And then this is 360. Remember the 332 volumes. Okay. And then over here, by the time we get to 320, this is foreign country one. Foreign country one is Korea, Vietnam, Japan. 332 volumes. Remember, this is 331. This is Western Lands 3. Western Lands 3. This is the Tibetan Grand Precious Religious King, several other religious king in Tibet. This is the Western Heaven Anand Virtuous Nation. This is Nepal, and this is the Tibetan commanding officer. The Chinese propaganda, or rather PRC propaganda, is to tell the Chinese nationalists that, look, this is proof that in the Ming history that Tibet is part of China. Because, look, we appointed a commanding officer in Tibet. Okay? Now, all this is in Chinese. For those of you who cannot read Chinese, I'm going to give you... Yes, sir.
Sir, this Western Heaven, they also refer for India.
No. No. This one, no. Actually, this one is now well recognized even in Chinese literature that it's a fake country. There was no such country. Some charlatans, okay, went to China and told the emperor that we represent this country and we're now presenting the president, because at that time, the Chinese emperors had made known to the entire world that if you bring present that's worth $1 or return at least some presents to you that's worth $2. It's that we are so rich, okay, that we don't want your present, but we appreciate your respect. Say you come and present me presents, you know. So for many of these merchants, it's really a good deal. You know, come and kowtow, and then you make 100% profit. I mean, it's really good business. Okay, and for this particular country, it becomes well recognized. It doesn't represent India, and it's, as I said, a fake country. Yeah.
If we go back to the earlier slide,
Yeah.
They show that Thailand and all that also a part of China? Do they claim so?
No, this is just a table of contents. I do want to emphasize that. When we go to the text, it contains detailed description and detailed account of why this was considered part of China, and they will have. This is okay. I'll give you I'll actually give you a better explanation when we get to this part, okay? And that is, just now the whole bunch of Chinese, right? And most of you couldn't read it. I've translated the whole table of contents into this thing, okay? And you see that actually, what the PRC tells people about this showing that, this proving China's sovereignty in Tibet because of the appointment of this commanding officer, you see the whole structure, you get a totally different story. But, well, most people read papers, newspapers, but they don't read the original document. You read the original document, it goes something like that. This is the structure of the Ming history, which follows the tradition that goes back for more than 2,000 years, because as was mentioned, official histories or correct histories were compiled by the Chinese central government all the way back to the Han Dynasty, okay? And it followed the same structure back to the Han Dynasty 2,500 years ago. And that's, you start out with the annals of main events, okay? It's a chronological order of events, okay? After that, remember, 332 scrolls, okay? For this particular Ming Dynasty document, the first part, of course, is in annals, okay? And then some of the important natural events, earthquakes, storms, famine, blah, 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 and so forth. And then there will be a geography section. And in the case of Ming history, there are 300 pages in 7 volumes or 7 scrolls. And this is how Chinese territories are recorded, okay, in Chinese tradition. So in this particular case, with Geography 1 to Geography 7, it describes, okay, all the regions of China, including the 2 capital cities and then the 13 provinces, namely Shandong, Shanxi, Henan, blah, 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 and so forth, okay? And then under Geography 7, Yunnan being one of the most remote provinces, then that province includes Burma, Laos, and northern Thailand. And this, of course, the tables of content. If you look at the text itself, then it contains a description of each of these areas. After that, there are other things that are sort of very relevant to China, the economy and taxation, judicial systems, and it goes through everything about that era. And then, of course, there will be biographies, and then these. By the time we get to here, it's 309, okay? And then after that, you have the later volumes that are devoted to things that are much less relevant to China, obviously. And one, of course, will be the ethnic rulers. And these are places that China recognizes and claims to be part of China, or part of the Ming Empire, but it was not ruled by officers that are sent directly from the central government, but they're ruled by these ethnic rulers which had some kind of a, whatever you call it, okay, affiliation with the central government. And then again, this is mentioned once more, right? That is, so it means that in Yunnan, Burma, and Laos, and northern Thailand, it was recognized and claimed as part of China, but they were ruled by ethnic rulers. And then after that, you have foreign countries, 1 to 9, and then these foreign countries include Korea, and basically it covers the relationships that these countries had with China. After foreign countries, then you have Western lands. Western lands is Xi Okay, for those of you who know something about Chinese, you know that Xi was a standard term used since the Han Dynasty to label lands that are west of China all the way to the Roman Empire. And these Western lands, 1 through 4, in Western lands 3, which is the second to last volume, that is where I show you just now the table of contents on the Tibetan regions. And so you have the Tibetan Grand Precious Religious King, you have this thing, and this one, I put a question mark there because it said, turns out to be a fake country that never existed. Then you have Nepal, and then you have this, which is the Office of Commander, which of course the PRC tells the Chinese nationals that, look, we do have, but it's actually, that's how it appeared, okay? And then, of course, the last scroll, Western Lands 4, includes places like Samarkand and, of course, places in South Arabia. So, it gives you a very different idea or impression of whether Tibet was classified as part of China. Now, in case you think that this would indicate that Tibet was not part of the Ming Empire, then the PRC can argue that, wait a minute, it's probably not that reliable, because remember I explained earlier that our tradition is that the history of the official history of one dynasty is written by the government of the succeeding dynasty, right? So the Ming history was actually written by officers appointed by the Qing emperor, right? So could it be that they were trying to belittle the achievement of the Ming Empire? In other words, could it be that Tibet was really part of the Ming Empire, but the Qing people were just not giving them proper credit? So let's look at a Qing document. I'm sorry, let's look at a Ming document that was compiled by the Ming government. So this is another tradition. Okay, just now we're talking about the official correct history tradition that goes back to 2,500 years. This is another tradition. And that since Tang Dynasty, about the 7th century, central governments compile what is called unification record, a catalog of all the territories of the central government. Okay, it's a detailed record. And so in the case of the Ming Dynasty, we have the imperially commissioned Great Ming Unification Record. And of course, it follows the traditional rules of the Great Yuan Unification Record. And the Great Yuan, of course, follows a Song, and the Song follows a Tang. It goes back, again, it's the tradition of that. And so, if you go again to Baidu, you can see a very straightforward description of the status, the stature, or the authoritativeness of such a document. In 1458, the Emperor Ming Emperor ordered the Prime Minister to work on a revision, which was completed in 1461, and then personally the Emperor wrote a preface and then bestowed the book, the name Great Ming Unification Record. Now, over the 276 years of the reign of this Ming dynasty, of course, territories changed. So, in most of these dynasties, those geographical records, they were re-edited or compiled or whatever. So, in this particular case, the book was revised 140 years later, within the same Ming dynasty, by the way. So, there are two editions. So, let's see what this particular. And I'm not going to bore you with the Chinese anymore, so this is a translation in English, okay, of the table of contents. And the table of contents, as you can see, there are altogether 90 volumes of this book, okay. This book has 5,600 pages, okay. It's a detailed catalog of all the land holdings of the Ming Empire as perceived by the Ming government. Okay? So it starts, of course, with the national capital cities, and then, of course, by the time we get to volume 32, we have provinces a little bit further out, okay, Shanxi. And then, of course, in the last few provinces, okay, they are relegated to the last few of the first 88, okay, of the 90. So this is China, okay? And then, of course, this is Yunnan, and of course, this is repeated. In other words, the Ming document claims the same thing. Burma is part of the Yunnan province, so it's Laos, and so is northern Thailand. And then after that, the Guizhou, which is usually considered the most remote province. And then, of course, they differentiate between the ethnic rulers and the non-ethnic rulers that are sent by the central government in this publication. After that, you have foreigners, okay? You cannot be more foreign than a foreigner, okay? I mean, the foreign aliens. And the foreign aliens include Korea, Japan, Okinawa, and then Tibet as well. Okay? And then, of course, there are 16 other entities listed under Foreign Aliens, volume 89. And in volume 90, there are more foreign aliens listed, and includes, these countries include those in today's Saudi Arabia. Yes, sir.
Sir, Xinjiang also does not appear anywhere?
Well, actually, there are other publications where the term Tianzhu was, but not this one, but there are many. Actually, I've gone through about more than 100 of these Ming era publications, and many of them, they do have Tianzhu, which is Indian. This one doesn't have Tianzhu. Pardon me if I offend you. First of all, I'm very ignorant in Indian history. But you have to realize that I think the Chinese assumption at that time was that there wasn't a unified India, right? You had at that time a Mughal Empire, and the Mughal Empire didn't really control the entire India. So actually, if you look at these Chinese texts, they do have individual places like Sri Lanka, Bangla, and places, but there was no India because there was no India at that time, I think. Right? So, anyway. But I will show you a diagram afterwards about time where they do show Tianzhu. And Tianzhu again is a general term for that whole part of India, and that comes from, of course, the monk Hui Zhang, Xian Zhang, okay? And that term was actually introduced to China because of the Buddhism.
I was talking about Xinjiang, the Kashgar.
What?
Kashgar belt.
Yeah.
Xinjiang.
Xinjiang, okay. Xinjiang, according to the Ming document, is definitely not part of Ming Empire. The PRC's version is, even remember the map, the PRC claims that Xinjiang at that time was China, even though it's not Ming Empire. Now this is a Ming document. The Ming Empire had no idea what PRC would be claiming, obviously. Okay, so they didn't show Xinjiang as part of China, obviously. Yeah. So I'm going to bore you with again. This is 5,600 pages of cataloging land holdings. So this is the capital city. By the time you get to here, it's 86, and this is the Yunnan province, and this is where you see Burma and Laos and northern Thailand again as part of the province. And then this is your foreigners, foreign aliens, Korea, Japan, and Tibet. And then, of course, there's the Java over here, there's Malacca over here, and so forth. Samarkand is over here. And these are the places that would correspond to what's today's Xinjiang. Okay? These are some of the Muslim places, and they're all under foreign aliens. And this Sulu will be the Philippines, and this is Sri Lanka. And some of these could refer to some of the principalities of India. Okay, pardon my, because some of these names actually we have figured out what do they mean. So anyway, this is the preface that's written by the emperor of the Ming Dynasty. Remember, I say that he wrote it, and this, of course, is a lot of bragging. I'll again, of course, present the English translation. China has this term, what's under heaven, but it's what's relevant. So this world C means the Chinese world that is under the sun or under heaven is relevant. So what this emperor is saying is that the first paragraph is just bragging. Since ancient times, emperors ruled the world, prospered by unifying the world C. Okay, so of course we unify the entire world. We, the imperial Ming family, by heaven's mandate, unify all Chinese and aliens. Of course we unify the entire world. Our territory is truly vast, and then westward, it reaches the sand dunes. I'll show you in the second map afterwards, okay, what this thing means, okay? So, and then of course, lands in all directions, without exception, come to a court to pay the respect. So the first paragraph, of course, is a bragging mood. But this is a dead serious document, okay? So after you finish bragging, we are now going back down to earth. So be very realistic right now. The emperor is saying, as for governing within our national boundaries, okay? Then there are the capital cities and the world C. The world is relevant to the Chinese, to us. It's divided into 30 provinces, blah, 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 and so forth. Okay, that's it, okay? This is a complete listing of all the Chinese places as stipulated by the Ming Emperor. But then also the Ming Emperor also says that the aliens in all directions to whom we confer official titles and who submit our subordination protocol, and that of course includes it. But there are really, you can see two parts, okay? And this is the real part of China that the Ming Emperor stated. Incident just now, remember that the emperor is bragging about how wide our territories are, and the west, it goes to the sand dunes. In Chinese, this is what the sand dunes mean, okay? These are the sand dunes over here. So basically, the Ming Emperor, when he was bragging about Chinese territory, he was saying that our western limits reaches here, okay? And of course, it's here, of course. Okay. You have a map in front of you. This is a map provided by the Great Ming Unification Record, the 1461 edition. This is a conceptual sketch presented by this book. And you can see that the Chinese areas, this is Nanjing, this is Fujian province, this is Jiangxi province. The China areas, it's frame, black background, white lettering. Everybody see that? This is Japan. It's a foreign country. It is not framed. It's black lettering, white background. This is Tibet. Non-framed, black lettering, white background. In other words, all the foreign places that are non-China, they're presented in one form or one format, and all the China places are presented in that form. The contrast is literally black and white. So, let me review what we have seen in this Great Ming Unification Record. The Great Ming Unification Record is a book that conforms to centuries-old tradition. It's commissioned directly by the Ming Emperor. It's jointly compiled and submitted by several dozens of senior court officials. In this particular case, the editorial board consists of 56 leading scholars. Okay, so and then the Emperor personally approves and writes a preface for it. Not only is Tibet excluded from the China section, is explicitly labeled as a foreign entity and grouped with many other equally foreign entities. And on the map that we have just looked at, the areas are differentiated in black and white. So it's difficult for me to imagine a more explicit and authoritative proof that Tibet was not perceived by the Ming government as part of Ming China. I want to emphasize that that doesn't prove that Tibet wasn't part of Ming China, because according to PRC's logic, the conclusion would be the Ming emperors and court scholars consistently refused to educate themselves seriously and correctly such a fundamental issue that is as bad as the Dalai Lama. I've downloaded this map purposely from the Germany Bavarian National Library East Asian Digital Collection. And this is, remember I said there are two editions, okay, because territories changed because Ming lasted for 276 years, okay? So in the 16,000 year edition, of course you have many of those copies in China and in Taiwan and Hong Kong, whatever, but purposely downloaded this from a German website to prove one point. You know, I joke to my friends, you look at my Rolex watch, R-O-L-E-X, you know my Rolex watch? I always wear very prestigious watches. This one I bought it in China for 2,000 rupees. Okay? My point is that today you go to museums, you see all these artifacts. Okay, this is gold. Okay, you have all these dead bodies, photographs. Okay, you have all these tools for atrocities, for punishing slaves. So you just wonder, are those things real? Can I really examine them? Okay. It's just like my Rolex watch, okay? You want to believe me? It's up to you. These things cannot be fake, okay? Because copies, original copies of these books are held not only by libraries in China and Hong Kong, whatever, they're held in this one, in Germany, okay? So, that's it. So you can see the same contrast over here, and that is the Chinese places, they are all framed. And then the non-Chinese places, they are non-framed, and in thinner, that's and this is close to okay. In other words, I'm using a Germanic source over here, a German source over here, of a different edition to say that, you know, the Great Ming Empire has been consistent through its 276 years of reign in indicating that they didn't consider Tibet as part of China. So we can now go back to what the PRCs claim about, you know, the authoritative publication that put out by the PRC. So this is a summary of what I have done so far. I'm going to look at 3 publications, okay, 3 official publications, okay. The PRC most authoritative statement, okay, the 8-volume historical atlas, the Qing Dynasty, Ming history, and there's under the tradition of what we call the Chinese official or correct history, and of course the Ming document, which is the unification record, which is a catalog of all the geographical places that again follows the Chinese tradition. It goes back to the Han Dynasty. You can see that the most recent one, the Great Ming Unification Record, Laos is the yellow part is China, the white part is outside China. So the Ming document is telling us that North Thailand and Laos is part of the Ming Empire, and then Tibet, together with a whole bunch of other things, there are alien. Okay? The Qing document, which is the Chinese official history, actually is consistent in its claim, and that is northern Thailand and Laos is inside China, and then Tibet, of course, just like these, okay, they are outside China, but of course Tibet is specified in the Western lands. Very roughly, Western lands are those that are connected to China through the land routes, and roughly speaking, okay, obviously Mongolia is not like that, but most of the areas like the Philippines and Indonesia, those places, they are classified under foreign countries. Again, there's a sea route. Okay, and again, I said, it's not the exact sort of the way of classification, but that's the sort of general idea. Difference between foreign countries and Western lands. As you can see, a PLC version is just reverse the whole thing. Tibet becomes this part, and then northern Thailand and Laos, of course. Okay. So, just again, without making any claims, I'm presenting it to you the different Chinese documentation and how they present. How many more minutes do I have? Keep going.
Don't you agree?
Well, okay. So, actually, because there was a question about, I'll see whether I have a slide to show you India. No, sorry. I'll get the other version of my slides. I have a slide that shows India, but right now, let me just continue with my real presentation. So I've just finished this part, okay, and that is, we have no time to talk about taxes and revenues and census stuff, so we're going to the next thing, okay, using an example of individual events. So we can look at this. Remember I said that Ming history has 332 volumes, and this is our national correct official history, and we were looking at only the table of contents. Right now, let's look at the text. The text is again very long. Okay? It talks about the hundreds of years of relationship and transactions between Tibet and China, but I have extracted a small part of it, okay, and translated. And so this is, of course, remember we say that Tibet is covered in Ming history, scroll number 331. Out of this scroll, I've taken out a small part. And of course, the content of that, the facts that are described over here, rather the narratives of it, can be also verified by the Ming veritable records, which of course is compiled in the Ming Dynasty by the Ming. So this is a Chinese, this is my translation of the Chinese name. Wu-Si-Zhang, okay, which is Tibetan Grand Pasha's religious king. Tribute submitted in 1506 and again in 1515. But around that time, 1515, the emperor was misled by his attendants who told him about a Wu-Si-Zhang monk, a Tibetan monk, that could see through 3 incarnations and was hailed as a living Buddha by people in the monk's country. Okay, they used the word country. Okay, Tibet was referred to as country. The emperor wanted to meet him and ordered the eunuch Yuan to be the ambassador to invite the monk. Okay, it's an ambassador sent to this place, faraway place, to invite the monk. And so the emperor had a discussion with his cabinet, and so the Prime Minister Liang Chu and others advised as follows. And this is as recorded by the Chinese official correct history. Although the early emperors of our dynasty have sent envoys there, but it was because the Wu-Si has just been conquered, blah, 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 blah. After we have enjoyed peace, the succeeding emperors have only bestowed presents to these Tibetans because they came to seek audience with the emperor, but we have never carelessly abused our diplomats by sending them to that God-forsaken remote place. Liu Yin was asking for, the eunuch was also asking for lots of resources. It's going to cause hardship to our government. Furthermore, after leaving, this is the Prime Minister talking to the Emperor. And the Prime Minister is saying that after leaving our border at Tianchen 6 barbarians, I'll show you in the map after where that place is, okay, it's in current. After leaving our border, there will be several tens of thousands of miles more to traverse, requiring several years. Okay, those areas will be totally outside our control. Along the way, there's absolutely no station. How would the entourage be defended? It would lower the stature of China and invite humiliation from the barbarians. The whole idea is totally unacceptable. We, your subordinates, regret that if you want to go on to do this, proceed with this, we will not perform the associated documentation work for your majesty. Okay? We're strongly against it. The emperor rejected the advice and went ahead with his plan. And so this is where tension, this is what the Prime Minister was telling the Ming Emperor. is that after you pass this point, you are outside our border. Okay? And of course, this is the GR. Oh, I do want to clarify one point. This is the PRC's map. Okay, this is the current map of China as published by the PRC. So, according to Ming history, this is recorded. Okay, there were a lot of money spent in making gifts to this living Buddha, strings of pearls, completely depleted the gold holdings of the imperial palace, used up all the gold. Gifts to the monk costing tens of thousands of pounds were made, and then tea and salt brought. Decreed that the eunuch be given 10 years for the return trip. Okay, the emperor had no idea where this place Tibet is. Okay, it's so remote. Okay, you have 10 years to do this. When Yuan's fleet reached Shandong province, it blocked the central government's fleet of taxation ships. Okay, these are called Cao Yin in Chinese. Okay, those were the ships, taxation ships for bringing grains from the southern provinces to the northern provinces to feed the people. Okay, they actually blocked these ships. Okay, that's sort of how big the event was. And then upon entering the Yangtze River, the ships are too big. The entourage switched to a procession of smaller boats that stretched for over 100 kilometers. After reaching Chengdu, okay, they asked for a lot of local support and used up a lot of local resources. The eunuch also wanted from the provincial government of Sichuan 200,000 taels of silver for further preparation of the trip into Tibet. And that corresponds to the entire annual budget of the provincial government. Okay? And so the provincial government finally fought and said, look, we'll give you 60% what you're asking for, which means that the provincial government is left with 40% of the money for running the provincial government. Okay? Workers then labored day and night making the required items. It's all straight translation, okay, from the correct official history of China. After staying in Chengdu for more than a year, remember he was given 10 years, okay, so he could take his own sweet time, right? So after enjoying himself in Chengdu for a year, he resumed his journey, accompanied by 10 military officers and 1,000 soldiers. This is the first and only time the Ming Empire has sent troops into Tibet, not for the purpose of making war, but for the purpose of inviting the monk to China. 2 months later, they arrived in the monks' region. Now, this is a straight translation, okay? It's not my wording. The so-called living Buddha was ready to the Chinese man harm and hit himself. Think about it. All of a sudden, you see a whole bunch of people bearing gifts, okay? You are wondering, who the heck are these suckers? Of course, you have every reason to be very suspicious. So, but this angered the Chinese military, and they planned to use force. The barbarians attacked them at night, seizing all the treasures and weapons. 2 officers and several hundred soldiers died, and the additional half of their number was wounded. They do not escape, but with nothing else. Okay? After reaching Chengdu, he issued a gag order, and then he sent an empty envelope to the court. This is the anticlimax, which is the climax of my presentation. When the report reached the court, the emperor that sent this delegation has died, and the successor, Shizhong, ordered the eunuch to return and be punished for his wrongdoings. The end. What does this anticlimax indicate? The eunuch didn't do anything wrong. Who should be considered as a culprit over here, according to this narrative? The monk, right? But there's no statement of any complaint or any retribution or any punishment plan, or even a condemnation against the monk, but they wanted to punish the eunuch. So how does it reflect on the administrative sort of power or sovereignty of the Ming Empire over Tibet? So that's just one of the many, many similar texts that's recorded, which is really coming back to when I say that China has a very, very reliable set of documentation and history, because they don't cover things up, they don't whitewash things, okay? Chinese emperors do not always appear as saints, as great leaders, and so. I think I'm out of time, am I?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Wouldn't you tell us something about the history of the Qing Dynasty, which was written by Zhao Weixin and others?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. But I was just told that my time is up.
Yeah.
But actually, for example, you can see this map over here. This is the map of another. This is the Qing Dynasty, and this is in Yongzheng. Okay, this is another great tradition of China. This is called the Hui. Okay, again, every Dynasty, the central government would then have sets of huidian, okay, recording all the regulations, all the records, and all the important aspects of the country. And in this Yongzheng, which is in 1727, this is a map of that huidian. Okay, again, it's a huge one. And again, this is, I got it from a reprinted version, okay, reprinted by the PRC. Okay? So in this version, you can see that this is China, okay, this is Korea, this is Vietnam, okay. Tibet doesn't even warrant a label. They don't even. So I mean that's how it was depicted. But again, I was just told that I can't.
No, would you like to explain why you asked that question?
It's a very, very apt question.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have no problem with
Professing
my
time.
question. You know, earlier history is characterized today by the Chinese as antiquity. Now, how old is antiquity is a question that you are also asking. But you are not giving us an answer to that question.
That's not my
Does
question.
antiquity in the Chinese view include only the pre-Qing period, or does it also include the Qing period, whose history was written by Zhao Sun and others?
Okay.
This was my question.
First of all, the PRC's position today is very clear, and that is antiquity means since the Yuan Dynasty. I think when the PRC first made this claim that Tibet was China since antiquity, they talk about the Tang Dynasty. Okay, they're talking about roughly like 600 plus years. They have then, shortly after that, revised it, because I think even the Chinese themselves thought it was just so ridiculously funny. Okay, so now it's Yuan. So that part is there's no debate, there's no question, it's very clear. So my research is says that given that the Chinese communists themselves have pushed antiquity to as recently as Yuan, which is pretty late by Chinese historical standards, okay, then we don't have to talk about anything before that. Okay, the other one is actually it's a very, very, very interesting point. Again, I don't have time to illustrate, but I'll make some claims. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but this
Professor Bhutani.
okay, Professor Bhutani. Yes, as Professor Bhutani has mentioned, the Qing history, the official history of the Qing Dynasty, was commissioned during the Republic of China era by, at that time, the emperor. Well, there's an answer about that. That guy's called yesterday. Okay, but so he appointed, as he pointed out, Zhao Xin, and Zhao Xin's brother is Zhao Feng, and I don't know how many of you realize that Zhao Feng has this nickname that's. Any Tibetans over here who know who Zhao Feng is?
Warlord.
What's that? What? Okay.
She's a Tibetan brought up in India.
No. Zhao Feng had this nickname of the butcher of Tibet, and he was recognized as the butcher of Tibet not only by the Tibetans but also by the Chinese. Okay, well, the Chinese look at it from a very positive angle. The Tibetans obviously look at it from a totally different angle. But anyway, but to answer your question, the two brothers, Zhao Xin and Zhao Feng, were the most knowledgeable people at that time of Tibetan affairs and the most closely related to Tibetan times. But then the brother, Zhao Xin, was appointed to Tibet. And if I have time, I'll show you some of the things that he has written. And you can see the tradition of Chinese historical compilation. And it's really very different from what the PRC is teaching the children and the nationals today. At that time, people believed that history is for recording facts, not for satisfying the needs, the political needs of the party or the government as a case. Today is different. You are taught that, okay, history is to serve the nation, political party, and the political needs. But if you look at this guy, okay, he was one of the most important officials appointed by the Qing Empire to unify Tibet. Okay? So when he was doing that, he was very successful together with his brother. I mean, look at it. His brother earned this name of the butcher of Tibet, right? He was very respectful. But you look at the things that he wrote, as a historian, you recognize that at that time that a person can wear different hats at different times. When you're serving the Qing Empire as an officer, okay, to unite China, okay, you do certain things. But as a historian, you will look at some of the things that are written again, you know, I mean, he became very honest. How do I know he's honest? I don't know for sure, but, you know, I mean, in most countries, all the emperors and all the kings and all the important events and the dealings with all the foreign countries is always, we are always correct and the other side is always wrong, right? I mean, that's no exception. But if you look at this, it's not like that. And I actually have just given you an example from Ming history, okay? The Ming emperor didn't appear to be really that smart, right? So that's to answer your question. But again, if you give me two more hours, I actually have some texts from and you can see that he actually reviewed very clearly that he didn't think that Tibet was part of China, which is very, 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 very indicative, you know, for a person like that to write things to hint that. Well, actually, in fact, at one point he said that the situation in Tibet has degenerated so badly that Tibet today is a protectorate of both countries, China and Britain. That's explicit wording he used in the Chinese official correct history, which the PLC never quotes. Yes.
Sir, something what would be more of interest also to Indians over here is, have you done any research or do you have some information about the way you presented Tibet? What about Arunachal, what they call it as South Tibet, and Assyrian part of India. So have you done any research?
No, first of all, to be frank with you, you have to understand, I'm ethnically a Chinese. Right? Yeah. I'm not here to help the Indians, obviously. Right? And really, I mean, really. And I don't want to get into this debate, okay? There are two things I do want to mention. One thing is to explain my position. The reason why I'm doing this is that I think that the Chinese have done something very wrong. They have not unified Tibet. They have actually invaded and occupied Tibet. Tibet was never part of China, given my understanding of the documentary evidence. And that's what I've been doing. I'm trying to collect evidence. And that's the reason why it's the same. I'm taking a completely extreme Chinese chauvinistic approach by saying that I only look at Chinese documentation. I want to use those documentation to convince the Chinese that, look, even according to your own official records, okay, Tibet was not part of China. Okay? So that's my intention, is basically my research, the target audience is the Chinese. Okay? I'm not trying to convince the Tibetans or the Indians or the British or whatever, or the Americans. I'm trying to convince the Chinese. Now, but the other thing that I also would like to say is that China is not unique. Most countries, if not all, most countries, I think, will tell the children their version of history, which is diametrically opposite from the version of history that's taught by their enemies. Right? Okay. So actually, we're talking about this dispute currently between China and India. Okay. Well, I mean, again, the Indians have the version, and that's how they teach the children. And again, I think it might be helpful if all of these countries, they look at the other side of the story. It so happens in my case, I'm looking at the Chinese side of history, and I've discovered something to my amazement that this is one of the rare occasions where the Tibetan side of the story turns out to be more correct than the Chinese side. Okay, according to Chinese documents. And that's the reason why I've devoted my past 7 years after retirement to do this. But I think in most of the international disputes, it's not like that. In other words, it's not black and white. But I have found that this is surprisingly black and white, as the map shows, by the way. I've shown the map, okay? And it's one of the very, very few instances. So these are the two clarifications I want to make
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how
Everyone's waiting on that.
Don't worry, I'm a grown up.
Especially the
I'm a
people
grown
out
up.
there.
Nothing embarrasses me.
You know, the Chinese go on saying one thing and the Indians go on saying something absolutely different. Neither of them really convinces the other or the rest of the world. At the same time, neither of them is in a position to recover any of the areas which the other side has taken. India cannot hope to recover Qing, and China, under any conditions, cannot hope to acquire Arunachal Pradesh. Whether they call it South Tibet or they call it North Manchuria, I don't care. But the base involved here is Arunachal Pradesh, which the Chinese cannot get under any conditions. Then what's the point? We can go on talking till the end of time. But sooner or later, there will have to be an agreement about the boundaries. And when that boundary agreement is made, where would the boundary be? By and large, where the present line of control is. Right, that is the common sense of the matter. Why does this common sense not dawn on the Chinese?
I perfectly agree with you. But that's, of course, something that I have no comment on because I know very little about it, because my specialty is on the question of whether Tibet was part of China or whether China ever had sovereignty over Tibet before 1950. Okay? After 1950, it was a military fact.
That's a different matter.
Yeah. But it's about a Chinese-Indian thing, okay? It's totally, of course it's related to Tibet, of course, but it's, I think that's...
I have a supplementary question, a very short one. Have you made presentation in China?
Hong Kong. If you define China, define China. Taiwan, yes.
If you go to mainland and talk to people there,
I would be arrested, I think. I should be arrested.
You have answered my question.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually, my wife and I travel a lot in China, and after I retired, I made a point to sort of do that, and with this conscientious sort of realization that I'll never be able to go back to China to travel. And my wife actually tells me very clearly that he thinks that I'll be very stupid to travel back to mainland China. Again, of course, go to Hong Kong and Taiwan and so on. So, one of the reasons why I can do that is because now I decided, after I retired, I moved to the United States. I live in the United States and I'm an American citizen.
Okay, so.
Just a related question, in fact. You mentioned earlier that your research findings are meant for Chinese audience.
And that's the reason why I use only Chinese documentation that is approved by the PLC.
Now, though you have not been able to go to mainland China to present your research, while you have not been able to present your research findings in mainland China, I'm sure they're aware of your findings there.
I don't know.
Why? I mean, you talk about it publicly, you publish it.
No, I haven't published
Not
it.
published.
Yeah. Every year I tell my friends that I'll finish it next year, and I've been doing that for the past 5 years. So I retired in 2014. By the way.
What I would want to know, is there any response from mainland historians or officials to what you have to say?
Actually, the answer is no.
Is there rejoinder? No, there is no rejoinder.
Yeah, and I would like to think that that is the best strategy. I would like to believe that the reason why they keep quiet is to ignore me is because I don't see how, honestly, because okay, I didn't start out supporting Tibetans, remember. I started out as any typical Chinese, brought up by the version of history that was taught to me by my parents and high school teachers and college level teachers and so forth, okay? So I was a Chinese that believed that Tibet has always been part of China. It's only when I started arguing with some of the people, okay, from other countries, and then I decided, and because of my background, I had this ability to look at the ancient records that most Chinese do not, okay, for a variety of reasons, opportunity, ability, time, blah, 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 and so forth. And then I convinced myself that, oh my goodness, you know, I mean, it's like my enemies are correct. Okay, but to finish that is that, I can objectively tell you that if today the PLC were to hire me to then do the opposite, I don't know how to refute what I've just presented. Which would mean that I think if I were to advise a PLC, the best strategy for them is just ignore me.
No, so my follow-up question is that, have you looked at the evidence, or so-called evidence, proffered by Chinese side to substantiate the...
Oh yeah, I'm very familiar. I was brought up with it.
Yeah, but have you been able to rebut that evidence? Because they have also come up with evidence, including,
I already showed you their statement, you know, I mean, that's it. You know, I already showed you.
What you have done is to look at Chinese sources and find some evidence which indicates that they didn't believe that Tibet was historically part of China.
Right.
But the Chinese side has come up with its own set of evidence to make the point that Tibet has historically been examined that.
Oh yes, and that's the reason why the book has taken me so long, because I'm talking about hundreds of pages to address every issue. The argument of PLC starts from the Yuan Dynasty, the Ming Dynasty, and for example, in the Qing Dynasty, which is the most debatable and controversial era, actually it can be proven, in my opinion, with 99.9% certainty that Tibet was not under China's control during the Ming Dynasty, during the Yuan Dynasty, and during the Hon-Shiang Dynasty. And I think, in fact, most scholars agree with that too. The only controversial period is the Qing Dynasty. And in Qing Dynasty, there are many arguments produced by the PLC. The establishment of what's called the Amban, which is, according to PLC, it's a governor that's sent by the Chinese government. So again, we have to examine this issue. Was he the governor? Was he an ambassador? How do you prove one way or the other? Let me digress a little bit. I'll give you this example, okay? I claim that I'm an American citizen. How do I prove that I'm an American citizen? Or what proof do you demand of me to prove my statement? What's the most convenient and obvious proof that I'm an American citizen? Passport, right? Okay. On the other hand, if I show you a photograph that I have taken with President Donald Trump and say, look, that proves that I'm an American citizen, does it count? Not only does it not count, but it immediately should cause you to suspect that I'm a charlatan trying to scam you, right? Not only that, it also is an insult to the United States government, because I'm implying that the United States government is so backward that I need to show a photograph of somebody, Okay? No, you're talking about sovereignty, you're talking about something that is very formal, and something that is open, particularly talking about a huge tract of land like Tibet. Think about it. You want to prove that country A has sovereignty over region B. What, again, are the most important criteria? And how do you prove each of those criteria? First of all, let's talk about criteria. Because even if I produce my passport, then you can question whether it's a fake passport or fabricated, right? So, first of all, I produce my passport, then I have to prove that it's a real passport. In the case of sovereignty, think about it. What would be the most important criteria for proving or to claiming that China had sovereignty over Tibet?
Tax.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, why would you care to conquer a place? Money, right? So, okay, you tax those people. But before you start taxing, there is a preceding step, which is, what's that?
Vessel state.
Yeah, census, tax rolls, right? You first of all count these people, and then you start collecting money of each of these people. You have to have a roll, tax roll, right? So these are some of the most important criteria: tax rolls, census records, then taxation, and there will be other things like judicial system, whether you have soldiers stationed in those areas, judicial system, whether your legal courts apply to those places. And in China, there's another thing that is very unique but extremely important, because I'm sure you know that the Indian civil service system comes from a British civil service system, and you know that the British civil system is copied from the Chinese system, right? I mean, the Chinese have this unique system that again goes back to centuries, where the most important privilege of every Chinese national is to be able to take the Chinese civil service examination, right? So you're talking about Mongolia, you're talking about Xinjiang, there are complete records of Chinese official civil examinations conducted in Mongolia and Xinjiang. So the question is that, were these Tibetans allowed to take these civil service examinations? And so, you know, there are many criteria. It's not like it's a passport for an individual. For the case of sovereignty over a certain country, you have all these claims, okay? And then, of course, the Chinese, the PRC also claims that there's such a thing as the Li Fan Yuan, which the PRC very cleverly translated as the Bureau of Mongolian and Tibetan Affairs. For those who know Chinese, the name of that office is actually called the Colonial Office, okay? which the PRC vehemently are opposed to, okay? But that is really the correct translation. So yeah, there are many of these claims, and so my research will have to address each of these claims. Was it Amban, a governor or ambassador? Was Li Fan Yuan the bureau to administer Tibet, or was it a colonial office? Did they tax the Tibetans? Were they given the rights to take civil examinations and so forth? I have only 45 minutes. Yeah, but yeah, I'm addressing each of those. And I think that's the reason why I have decided to do what I'm doing, is that the more I'm doing this, the more I'm convinced that this is one of the rare cases in world history where the documentary evidence is just so contradictory to the official government's view that I think that I should tell my compatriots that really we shouldn't go and rob some other people's land. It's a blunt statement.
Yes, question.
Professor, Chinese government position has always been that whenever Chinese central rule was weak, the peripheral states have revolted against Chinese administration and gone away.
Yeah.
When it became strong,
Yeah.
it reclaimed those territory back
Yeah.
and got them under effective control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going by your research,
Yeah.
whatever record or whatever evidence you have produced,
Yeah.
they can very conveniently say these were the eras or these were the times when the central administration in China was weak, and therefore you find Tibet in what you call the white background against black, or black backgrounds or white. And there were other times when the Chinese central rule was effective, they brought the peripheries into Chinese domain, and this had remained the pattern. And therefore when they say that Tibet has been part of China since antiquity, they are right. They say in between, from then, from the antiquity, whatever time you want to put, till today, there are say 5 or 6 phases when Tibet was out of their control and then it was brought back. How do you counter that?
Okay, a short question, I'm sorry, a short answer to your question, of course, is that just look at this map. This was not the time when China was weak. This was the time when, this was the Ming Empire, where China was very strong. I don't know whether you've heard about the Yuan Zheng He.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, he was in all kinds of countries throughout the world, okay? So this was the time when the emperor specifically, I would say that Tibet was part of China, okay? So that claim by the PLC is just historically false, okay, to begin with. There is another example, and that is, actually, if you look at in the past, before, prior to 1950, there was only one time when China had really military control and real administrative and military control over a large swath of Tibetan land, and it's towards the end of the Qing Dynasty. Okay, that's about the weakest era of China. It was defeated by the British, Opium War, the Japanese after the Boxers' Revolution, and the empire itself was actually being overthrown by the Han, okay? And you know about the Zhao Feng, okay? The Zhao Feng conquest of what's today, what the Tibetans call the Amdo and the Kham in those areas, that was in the weakest part. And there was a time when China actually had the strongest control over China. But there was a time when Zhao Feng earned this nickname of being the butcher of Tibet. So what the PLC claims is just absolutely just not true. Not even by. We don't even need to use, ancient documentation like that. But just plain history that even they themselves teach in the high school. If you look at those events, you see that is not true. But of course, my research goes one step further, because my research shows that it doesn't really matter whether China at that time was weak or strong. Tibet was never part of China, even when the China was strongest, like during the Yuan Dynasty, which of course, I think a lot of people say, well, Yuan isn't part of China to begin with, okay? I mean, it's not China, it's invaded. But again, that's a separate issue, okay? I think the Chinese official history of the Yuan Dynasty, which is called the Yuan history, as you would expect, the Yuan history, and also the Yuan unification record, which is compiled by the Yuan central government, which of course consists of a whole bunch of Mongolians. You think they indicate very clearly that Tibet wasn't part of China?
Okay,
so even
Professor, you went to some pains to tell us that your study is based entirely on this German map available now in Germany.
Not entirely.
Not entirely.
It's just
one of the
many.
The ones that you showed.
Just to prove my point, that my Rolex watch, okay, can be fake.
I take your point. My question is that are the Chinese officials today entitled to say that what you are showing us is in fact manipulated?
No,
and that
because
what they have is the real thing.
Yeah.
No, that German version, you can go to any library, not any library, the major university libraries in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, and in China, and you find the same map.
Okay.
The only reason why I'm downloading from a Germanic website is to prove my point that nobody can refute these things, and also nobody can fabricate these things, because there's so many sort of identical copies of the original edition. These are rare books that are held in many different libraries. See, we have now books published. For example, I actually, well, it'll take me some time. If you want, I can show you afterwards. These are encyclopedias, for example, that are published during the Ming Dynasty 400 years ago, and there are original editions of these encyclopedias preserved, for example, not only in China but in Japan, for example. If you look at how these encyclopedias present India or Tibet or whatever, or Burma, whatever, and you basically see the same thing. So my point is to stress that there are just so many copies of original editions of these hundreds of books, okay, they all tell the same story. In other words, if you have a time machine today, and you can travel back to the Ming Dynasty era, and you tell those Ming Dynasty people that Tibet is part of China, they probably be more shocked than the Tibetans today. That's what I'm.
German map seems a little different from this.
Yes, because this is 160 years later. Okay, this is
because that it doesn't have white and black background.
Right, yeah. But still, there is quite a contrast. Yeah.
The only difference is that there's no box.
Right. Yeah, but remember, this catalog has 5,000 plus pages. And I'm looking at an audience who cannot read Chinese, okay, and I only have 45 minutes, so I'm just showing you one page. If you read the text, it's pretty obvious. Yeah.
Another question.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Again, I do want to stress that this is just one of the more than 100 books of similar level of stature, okay, that shows basically the same thing. I'm sorry.
The point you're making about white and black.
Yeah.
It's not substantial.
Right. Yeah.
But the differences.
Yeah.
And this is also if it is the original text.
Wait a minute. Does this gentleman want to ask a question?
Extraordinary presentation. And you said you're no American citizen?
Yeah. I'm now American citizen. That's the reason why I can afford to do that.
How far do you disagree about a 17-point agreement between Mao Zedong and the Tibetan leader, for which they are with China by peaceful or forceful?
We haven't come to that yet, and this is actually not part of my research because China claims that Tibet has been part of China since antiquity. Therefore, the 1950 peaceful unification by military force, I always like this statement, okay, is that China liberated Tibet peacefully with military force. That was not an invasion or occupation, it's a unification, but a unification is because pre-1950 was part of China. So my research concentrates only on whether Tibet was part of China before 1950. After 1950, I don't talk about it at all because there's no point talking about it. It's a military fact.
What about after 1911?
What? Okay, that part, yes, yeah, and then again, that part actually again is non-controversial among scholars because I think it's pretty obvious that at that time China had no control over Tibet. So
had no control, but asserted there.
Yeah, in other words, it wasn't part of China. I mean, it was pretty obvious. I mean, by 1913, okay, not only all the Chinese were kicked out of Tibet, but actually a lot of the Chinese were, well, they were slaughtered by Tibet. Okay, so
okay, finish your question.
Yes, see, between India and China, was the 1962 drama, which China conquered.
I'm sorry, say that one more, please.
1962 war between India and China.
Yeah.
You remember, well?
Right.
And
Not really.
Chinese did it.
Yeah.
They withdrew.
Yeah.
Then India reoccupied.
Yeah.
China said, this is mine. Said there.
Yeah.
Said, no, this is mine. This is
Yeah.
still yet to be explored, if I may say so.
Yeah.
And do you think this belongs to who? One point. Secondly, you said that in Burma also, about Burma's image in Qing to Myanmar, and in Burma, thousands of Nagas are there. Thousands of Nagas are in Arunachal Pradesh, which is known as Nepal, and Nagas are on Assam, etc. So, do you think all these Nagas also belong to Chinese or what?
Okay, the first question is that what happened in 1962 again is totally outside my research. My research begins at the beginning of the Yuan Dynasty and ends at 1949 because after 1949, as I said, it's a fact that Tibet became part of China. Okay, so anything after that, I'm only addressing this issue that the PLC claims that Tibet has been part of China since antiquity, which is from Yuan Dynasty to 1949. So after 1949, I would say that I plead ignorance, and frankly, I'm not interested. Okay, so that's the answer to the first question. The second question is that when you're talking about Burma and Laos being part of China, I didn't say that. I have no opinion. I'm simply showing you what the Ming Emperor was claiming, what the Qing people appointed or commissioned by the Emperor, what they were saying, and also how the PLC is claiming. I'm not claiming anything. What rights have I to claim? I mean, I'm not even a Chinese national, let alone official. Okay, what rights have I to claim anything? But I think the Ming Emperor has a lot of rights to claim something about his territory, and let's see what he says. So I'm just showing a document showing you that the Ming Emperor certainly claimed Laos and Burma to be part of China, and he certainly indicates that Tibet wasn't part of China, regardless of whether he was right or wrong. In fact, then I actually then say that this document can be interpreted by the PLC to indicate that the Ming Empress is just as bad as the Dalai Lama. Which is up to you.
Okay.
I have no right to do the interpretation. I'm not even trying to interpret anything. Okay, I'm just showing you those documentary evidence that are published by the PLC herself. Does that sort of answer your question?
We have some young ones down the back.
I want to ask you that what documents China is using to claim its sovereignty? Is it the same document that you're using, or is it different? I mean, is it solely the government documents that you are using, or is it also apart from the government documents?
Well, I have actually given you some examples of that. And of course, for example, the Chinese, the PLC. It's a big difference between the Chinese and the PLC. Okay, I really want to emphasize that. Okay, just like you can see, there are two versions of history: the PLC's version of history and the Chinese version of history. And the difference is about day and night. Okay, if you read the Chinese documentation, you will see that PLC's version of Chinese history and the Chinese version of Chinese history, I mean, there's very little resemblance. Okay, and to answer your question with a specific example, it's just like this one. Okay, is that what the Chinese texts and the Chinese teachers tell people is this? They'll say, hey, look at the Ming history. You know, if you go to our national correct official history, it shows clearly that we appointed a commanding officer. So he's using the same document as I'm using, except that when they are telling the school children that there's a commanding officer, they really didn't tell the people that, hey, look, the commanding officer is over here, below Holland and below Italy. Okay? Okay? So we use the same documents, except that I'm showing the whole thing, whereas they're showing a snapshot. The same thing with something like that. The same thing with something like that. This is the claim, okay? This is the PLC's statement, okay? That is, this is part of China. No source given by the map's author, because if you look at the book, published by the PLC, they simply say, this is by authority of the Chinese government. But again, to be fair to the Chinese and the PLC, look, when you were taught about the territories of India, and you had used those atlas and maps when you were in high school and college, did you also question the source? I don't know. But over here, the source is not given. But this is not the end of it. Actually later on, when they were presenting the Qing maps, okay, you see, this contradicts the great Ming unification record. And so they simply do not mention the source, okay? And this is in the Historical Atlas in 8 volume, in volume 7, okay? By the time we get to volume 8, actually what happens is that when we get to the Qing Dynasty, eventually, because you see, in Qing Dynasty, well, actually the key time point is 1792. See, before 1792, you can look at the Chinese documents. Not only they didn't claim Tibet to be part of China, they couldn't be bothered with Tibet because it's just a remote, godforsaken place that they have no interest in it. You know, we saw from the get. Now, so what I've shown you just now is that Tibet wasn't even labeled. Okay, I mean, these one countries at least were given the courtesy of a label, but you know, I mean, that's how irrelevant. That's in 1728. By the time we get to the same authoritative source or the authoritative statement by the Qing central government in 1812, and in that unification record of the Great Qing, this map does show that Tibet is part of China. Okay? Because as I say, the key turning point is 1792. And then if you look at the map of the Historical Atlas published by the PLC, when they present the Qing Dynasty map, they actually cite the source. They say, according to this source, Tibet was part of China. In other words, for the Ming map, when the original Ming documents do not support PLC's view, they just don't mention it. But finally, they have to wait another 300 years. When it comes to this, they do cite this. Okay. So that's it.
Okay,
you know, I mean, this is a very complicated issue, so that would mean there are many arguments, so you have to look at each of those arguments and then look into that.
Bing.
Thank you, sir. I actually am a researcher here, but I work on contemporary politics, modern politics in China.
Yeah.
But with regard to your presentation, I was just, though the topic was very provocative when you say authoritative, you know. So I just want to ask you, like you being an American citizen today, how do you perceive, like when you have been working to different places, like especially in libraries, visiting libraries in America or in Taiwan or in Singapore or even in Hong Kong. So how do you, like you must have come across a lot of very nationalist intellectuals at the same time, because when I was at Cambridge, at Kennedy School, you have a lot of people coming from China who are civil servants, government servants or leaders. So when you interact with them, so how do they, you know, face you to say? Or secondly, like at the same time, in Chinese history or in, you always have this notion of 天高皇帝远. Right? So how do you, you know, like even if you are fire but making noise, people don't give you so much of a, as you said also, like people ignore you. So do
Not
you?
people ignore you, the PRC.
Yeah. Sorry, I mean to say the PRC ignores you. So how do you negotiate this? Because as we see in China today, anti-corruption campaign happening and a lot of intellectuals being behind bars. Though you have alluded to that point, but is it too risky? Because even in being foreign countries, I don't think so. It's being so not so helpful, I guess. So.
I gather he has a very protective and wise wife.
Yes.
Yeah, but
So,
okay. I am a retired person living in the United States with, how should I put it, independent income. I can say whatever I like. Really, I mean, it really boils down to that. Okay? Like, I think this, I have been giving talks in the past 20 days in India. My wife and I, we were invited by the Central Tibet administration. And then they have invited us many times to give talks similar to this. They have always offered to pay for my airfare and our hotel expenses. We have always politely declined. We pay our own way for airfare and whatever. And so the problems that you have mentioned, it just so happens that it's not a problem to us. And I can afford, I'm in a position where I can afford to do what I'm doing because I can see that, well, this is ethically, morally, and also intellectually something that I enjoy doing. But you're right, I mean, not everybody can do it if you have a job. Well, you know, and I think, suppose if I'm teaching Chinese history, even in an American university, then I couldn't afford to do this because I would offend the Chinese government. I will not be able to have access to Chinese documentation. You know, the Chinese government would not invite me to these Chinese conferences and so forth. So I wouldn't do it. Does that sort of answer your question? I'm sorry, I was a little bit blunt just now, but I don't know how else I can answer your question. Okay.
Okay, I had a question about your Yunnan province and the fact that it included Laos and northern Thailand. Where was this Nanchao kingdom that is often talked about as being a sort of independent kingdom?
Yeah.
In the south of China, in that same region.
But that's in the Song Dynasty, and it was completely obliterated by the Mongolians. By the time the Mongolians sort of started the Yuan dynasty, that part was gone together with the Song Empire. So and then eventually it became integrated into China. So that was before the era that I'm interested in. Remember, because I only talk about Yuan, and by Yuan dynasty there was no more of this Nanchao.
Nanchao. Yeah. But nonetheless, it gets talked about as though it's very much
right. But rather irrelevant to the Tibet sovereignty issue because it was before the Yuan dynasty, and so I don't think the PRC disputes the fact that Nanchao was an independent country because, well, nobody complains about Nanchao being invaded and conquered by not the Chinese but the Mongolians. Of course, Mongolians are also Chinese by by PRC standard. That of course becomes a totally different issue. Yeah. I'm concentrating on only just one issue, and that is, was Tibet ever part of China since antiquity, as defined by PRC as since Yuan Dynasty? And my purpose is just to come up with evidence that would support the Tibetans in arguing that well, the PRC's claim is just not supported by the official documents that are validated, that are recognized by the PRC government itself. It's a very narrow topic.
Okay, let me go down the back again. Jeremy.
Thank you, Professor, for your very detailed exposition on this.
Not detailed, it's like 0.5% of all the material I have.
I know, I mean, if you had spoken about the Yuan and the Qing, I think then it would have gotten really controversial. Yeah. And because you've also been speaking in Dharamshala and other places, that would have been very interesting to know how they saw your research, because according to even Tibetan historians and a lot of Tibetologists, China exercised some amount of indirect rule. They accept that during the Yuan dynasty, Tibet was under some sort of subjugation. So when you're saying that it was not at all, Tibet was completely independent during this period, so this really turns the table then. So you're actually saying more than what they're claiming, the Tibetans. This is one thing that I wanted to ask, and second was about the sources that you're referring to with respect to what the PRC uses to claim Tibet as part of China since antiquity. So you spoke a couple of times about what the Chinese government is using in textbooks, history textbooks, to teach the Chinese students. So I thought that was what you're using mostly. But as a scholar, when I'm looking at Chinese claims on Tibet, I also have referred to a lot of these books, like the 100 Questions on Tibet or Historical Status of Tibet. These are publications brought out by the Chinese press.
That's the PRC version, not the Chinese version.
I'm sorry, I should say the PRC version. Even the white papers, they don't really talk about what you say, like the Chinese government claiming to the students, Chinese students, about the commanding officer during the Ming dynasty. A lot of their claims are mostly about the Yuan dynasty, the Qing dynasty, or they even go back when they talk about the Tang dynasty, about the Princess Hon-Shiang and her relations with Songtsen-Gam, the King, Tibetan king. So Ming really does not figure so much in their narrative to claim Tibet as part of China. In these Chinese, at least PRC sources that are available to outsiders. So when you're so are they teaching something different to the students through the history textbooks, and they're not using this as a claim in the other sources? So why is that so? I mean, if that is the case, then why?
It's a big question. I don't know how I could really satisfactorily answer all of them, because basically I need to show you my entire book. That would take me 25 hours, whatever. No, let me try to answer what you're saying. Okay, the first part is that again, I have to be blunt. I'm not trying to brag over here, but I was told that His Holiness the Dalai Lama in the past several months have been quoting what I told him. Because what I told him was that regarding the sovereignty of China over Tibet during the Yuan dynasty, the only evidence that exists, and the only evidence that the PRC has produced, are books written by the Tibetan monks. Okay? Actually, there is no Chinese source indicating that China had sovereignty over Tibet. Even the Mongolians themselves, when they write the history in Mongolian language, they don't claim that they've ever invaded or conquered Tibet. The sources are from Tibetan monks. Okay, in other words, hey, it's like you mess up yourself. And of course, when the Dalai Lama heard that, he was somewhat surprised. But that's true. That's true. And then you have to start discussing the question, and that's the reason why I took pains in explaining Chinese historiography. Okay, the difference between Chinese historiography and the history records of most other nations is that you have this traditional custom, or tradition of having scholars, secular scholars, to write down history. Okay, there's no deity, no fairy tales, no miracles, nothing. Okay, if you look at that book that is quoted over and over again by Western scholars and by the PRC, improving China's sovereignty over Tibet in the Yuan dynasty, okay, you would see that Most of the books consist of accounts of these miracles, of just magical feats by these monks. And I think it's a little bit sort of amusing that the Chinese communists, which are atheists, okay, they would actually accept a book like that. Now, I think again, I'm not trying to make any conclusion, but in my book, I'll give you extracts from that book, which is the main proof of Ming of Yuan sovereignty over Tibet, by just showing you this book where you have the description of all these miracles. Okay, it's very much like well, there are many cultures that are doing things like that, and for example, the Bible is a Jewish history, okay, and of course you look at the Bible about how big the empire is and how strong the empire is, okay, but if you're not of the Jewish faith, then you start questioning how much of that is believable, you know, and the Tibetan thing becomes very awkward, is that because it comes from a Jewish monk. So that's part of the answer. And that is actually, there are a lot of these source documents that people don't care to look at. If you look at the source documents, that's the reason why I stress on the primary records. If you look at the primary records, it gives you a totally different impression of, we don't know what the historical facts are. We will never know, okay? But what we can know is that what these different documents show. And when these documents, they show you contradicting versions, then you need to have some basis of making a judgment as to which document is more believable and which document is not, and that's it. I think the second part of your question relates to whether the PRC government uses these sources, and I think the answer is mostly no. In other words, yeah, I think Ravi mentioned that. This PRC version of history is very different from the history that is revealed by these Chinese primary documents.
Right.
It's just unfortunate. And that's what I'm showing.
Yes, one final question.
You have successfully shown that Tibet has never been a part of China, but this is further corroborated beyond this 1812 that Tibet and Mongolia has also entered into an independent treaty between the two countries in 1913. So that treaty is available.
Yeah.
So that also shows that it has not been a part of it. And second important thing is that the Tibetan map, which is produced by the Tibetan Autonomous Government in Exile here, shows a lot of part beyond the TAR. So how does that come into picture, whether it is amalgamation post-1949, or is it the result of the 1914 Shimla Treaty, which China has not acceded to, but the map of China, map shown in that Shimla Treaty between Tibet and British period was only confined to the TAR region. So can you throw some light on this?
Okay, again, remember, I am adopting an absolute Chinese chauvinistic approach, right? So I'm taking actually the PRC's position, and then I only trust Chinese documentation. The PRC's position on the Shimla Convention is that the PRC basically telling us it's just totally invalid, okay? Just total nonsense to begin with. So there's really no point talking about it, okay? And then when you're talking about the maps that are published by the CTA, again, the position is that they're totally untrustworthy. Okay, I mean that's the reason why I use only Chinese maps that are published by China to support my claim, because I don't think I have any credibility in showing my Chinese compatriots maps that are published by the Dalai Lama's office or the government and say, hey, that's what they say, because they will just completely dismiss it. I don't think I will have a chance of
But China has taken a position that this map of Tibet, which China shows only in TR, has already been accepted by the Tibet in 1914 Shimla Treaty. So why it is being produced again and again, they are showing the parts of China. That has been this consistent position.
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question of the logic of it. I use Okay, are you talking about, for example, the Ming Empire map or the Qing Empire map?
No, I'm not talking about these maps.
1914.
I'm going beyond that, what position China has taken, though it has not been part of Shanghai Agreement, it says that the map of TR, the map of Tibet, which the Tibetan then government has already agreed to British and which has already acceded its suzerainty, not sovereignty. So why it is still showing the entire part of China into that map? This was my contention.
Well, China, and that's not a PRC's problem. Even the Republic of China, they have never agreed to and have never recognized Tibet's claim of independence.
That's right.
Okay? In other words, the ROC position, even today, is that Tibet has always been part of China. What you're saying is what the Tibetans are claiming. But what I'm saying is that I want to limit myself to what the Chinese themselves are claiming.
Why 1792 would be inflection point?
Okay, now that part, because again, as I say, my target audience is the Chinese. I want to convince the Chinese that according to your own documentation, so I cannot use other people's documents. 1792, again, it's by the national history, the correct history, the Zhao Xin edition of Qing history. That was the invasion of the Nepalis, and then the Qing Empire sent General Fukangan to Tibet, repelled the Nepalese army, chased them out of Tibet, and also entered Nepal. And then, of course, the Chinese, the PRC claimed that the Qing army then entered Nepal and defeated the Nepalis, and then of course got its surrender, and then eventually Nepal in fact also became a tributary country, and in fact in many places Nepal was listed as of equal status with Tibet as tributary protectorate Fanshu, okay, colonies of China. Okay? That's the PRC version. If you look at the Qing history version, which is Zhao Xin version, then it really says that the army entered Nepal, but they were not able to capture the capital, and then eventually it was near winter, and they were afraid that they would be trapped, very much like what happened to Napoleon's army in Russia. So they had to retreat, and then there was this statement, very clear-cut statement by Zhao Xin of. So I should say that after that, the Qing Empire then imposed what's called the rehabilitation clauses of taking care of Tibetan affairs. I think today the PRC calls it as the 29th article, and then this, by his very words, Zhao Xin said, this is the start of China having complete sovereignty over Tibet. There was the first time that China explicitly claimed Tibet to be part of China in the sense that we, starting from now, with the imposition of this clauses, 29 clauses, we now have complete sovereignty. So in other words, even according to the Chinese correct history, sovereignty doesn't start till 1792. Now, simply because you have claimed sovereignty over somebody else, it means that you have acquired it, right? But it does mean that, in my opinion, there's nothing to talk about before 1792, because even Chinese government themselves never claimed it. Then, after 1792, then we need to talk about the criteria I think that I mentioned. Okay, that's did they really collect tax? Were they able to well, impose a judicial system and so forth. Then, of course, then we have to look at each of those things. Okay, stamps, postage, coinage, currency, you know, and all these things. And again, that's the reason why I've been doing this for the past 7 years.
Well, I think this was an absolutely wonderful presentation.
Well, thank you very much.
And I think it also reminds us really to stop thinking that the Chinese also, because via their sovereignty over Tibet now, are claiming parts of India. Because if you go back to travelers' accounts of the which I've been reading recently from the early 1900s up to the 30s and 40s, Tibet managed, it was a very hard place to get to. People simply couldn't get there, except in disguise or going as monks or, in various other ways. So it's, so it's not a question just of China claiming Indian territory or the other way around. It's where were the frontiers of Tibet itself, even though the British were pushing hard to get to Lhasa and to establish the route to China there. So I think that's a sort of somehow the Tibetans' own where is Tibet, not the greater Tibet discourse, but just with reference to this area. This sort of gets missing, and we in India miss it because we think that China's claiming parts of India. Well, when were they? How were they parts of India, except through the British expansionism within the subcontinent? So I think there's sort of some other history there that one needs to know, and that is not brought up. It's not about these two big countries and the buffer state, but it's what was that other state. So anyhow, this was a most revealing talk. It's a privilege to hear you, and we would like you to stay in touch, and we would like to. It's a pity we couldn't have the whole presentation. We couldn't have a whole semester on each document and an explanation. But thank you very much on behalf of all of us.
Well, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I appreciate it very much, and I'm honored by your presence. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
Thank you.